Let's talk about Wales right now. Welsh trolley police, I love that description, in supermarkets have sparked fury yet again over the issue of non-essential items, whether or not they can or cannot be on sale in supermarkets. This as they entered at the weekend a 17-day mini lockdown, firebreak it was called, but it's a lockdown in all but name, where it meant that non-essential shops were closed down. Essential shops like supermarkets allowed to continue, but they were told they couldn't sell non-essential items. Big question mark. What were non-essential items? Greeting cards, apparently. Saucepans, even though people can't go to a restaurant. If you haven't got the saucepans at home, you can't cook. But also we saw the absolutely absurd situation yesterday where a woman was told she couldn't buy sanitary products, would you believe? And even a woman told she couldn't buy baby milk. Tesco refused to sell the sanitary products. They said it was the government that had told them they couldn't. The Welsh Government said, no, it wasn't us. But why are we arguing over these silly nitty-gritty things, and whether or not why we should be having a lockdown in Wales at all and banning anyone from opening any shop? Let's talk to Andrew RT Davies, who's the Shadow Health Minister for Wales and former leader of Welsh Conservative Party. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. There's no doubt at all the Welsh Government has got itself into rather a big pickle on this whole supermarket non-essential items ban. They keep saying, no, of course, it's up to the discretion of the shopkeepers themselves about whether an item is essential or non-essential. But given that lots of supermarkets decided that books weren't essential, which is rather worrying in a free and democratic society, should we be leaving it up to their discretion?
Well, they have got themselves in a hell of a pickle, to be honest with you, although when you see them standing at the lectern at their press conferences, they seem to be in complete denial about it and wanting to pass the buck on to anyone but themselves. It can't be right that, mothers who've got children in hospital can't buy pyjamas for their children or buy baby milk, or the absurd situation we saw yesterday, which I appreciate was corrected later on by the supermarket, of a lady not being able to buy sanitary products. The fact of the matter is that sort of conversation shouldn't have to be had anyway as such. And that just shows the way the regulations have been implemented here in Wales and the absurdity of Welsh Labour running Wales.
Well, indeed, also it's the notion of this sort of non-essential goods. I mean, I'm pretty sure that chocolate and I don't know, a beer aren't essential items. I mean, they are in my life, but they're not technically speaking. I mean, other than vital foodstuffs and medicines, and soap, nothing else is essential. We know what we absolutely need to survive. And yet there's sort of this. I suppose this rather sort of puritanical decision from the government in Wales to decide what we can and can't do. What I find fascinating is we all most of us, the vast majority of us, went along with measures and restrictions in that national lockdown across the UK back in March and April, and we thought we were doing it for the good. Now I think a lot of us realising, I felt rather slow to this, that actually these lockdowns simply don't work and we can't control the virus in this way and we need to get back to normal life. Why do you think people are so focused? I mean, huge petition, far more than people were excited about free school meals and Marcus Rashford, but massive petitions about that, allowing shops to sell non-essential items. And yet not a massive uproar and outcry about the fact that all these non-essential shops are forced to close. Why on earth does the virus not spread in a supermarket, but it does spread in a bookshop? I mean, do viruses genuinely know what's on sale?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head there in three ways. One, should a government be issuing lists of what people class as essential and not, as the case may be? That as reminiscent of Eastern Europe and what they used to tell us was good for us and what was bad for us.
Well, and March earlier this year.
Well, no, that didn't happen in March this year, where you could go into a supermarket and purchase whatever goods you required. Admittedly, to get to the supermarket, it had to be classed as essential travel, and that was an acceptance across the United Kingdom. But there weren't these lists, and there wasn't plastic put round goods in supermarkets in March this year. And the point you say about circulating in supermarkets, the virus knows no bounds, as we know. But the Welsh Government yesterday came out and said that actually, if you've got any doubts, pop over to an assistant and ask the assistant what she or he might think is essential goods. Well, there you have a case in point where they're trying to actually encourage, walking up to people and having those types of conversations. As a Welsh Conservative, we voted against this lockdown. We don't think the evidence is there to support it. 80% of Wales has been under some form of lockdown already leading up to this national lockdown now. And when you look at the evidence SAGE put forward, they actually said that the harms and effectiveness that this lockdown was based on, the evidence was very weak. And so,
well, indeed, World Health Organization has advised against lockdown as the measure to use.
Well, exactly, but they seem to be hell-bent on doing it. And we had a deputy minister from the Welsh Labour government only on the weekend saying we're highly likely to see another lockdown in January/February of next year. So it hardly shows that they've got a plan to take us out of this lockdown mentality. And in fact, the only plan they seem to have got is a rolling lockdown. But yesterday on the Welsh news, we had the absurd situation of seeing a riot van turn up at a church to close it down because the congregation had gathered in an act of prayer on Sunday. Now, you can think what you want of religion, and I'm pretty easily either way on this, but it shouldn't be a riot van turning up at a church to disperse a congregation.
Are you concerned that the government has seized, and we, the British public, have almost happily, and goodness knows the poll shows an awful lot of people are still happy to do, given away our fundamental freedoms and rights? On a supposition that's simply not backed up by not these science, any science at all, that lockdowns will actually mean long-term fewer people die from this virus. Are you worried that we're not actually ever going to get these freedoms back? Because that's my concern right now.
Well, I think what we've got to be clear here is we're talking about the Welsh Labour government, and it's not so much in other parts of the United Kingdom that these powers have been assumed by the government of the day. And what we've also got to talk about is the petition, because you raised that in an earlier question. In Wales, 70,000 people have signed this petition. In the UK context, because the Welsh population is only 3 million and the UK population is 67 million, that would be about 1.5 million, 2 million people taking the effort to sign a petition to show how much they disagree with a measure. That, to me, shows the level of public disquiet over this. And what we got to remember is politicians, legislators can legislate and create regulations all they want, but if the public don't buy into it, then it's going to be ineffective. And what we've got to do is bear down on the virus, learn to live with that virus, because until the vaccine comes along, we're going to be in problems with it.
Long after the vaccines come along, that's the reality. Thank you very much for joining us, Andrew RT Davies, Shadow Health Minister for Wales and former leader of the Welsh Conservative Party. Appreciate that. Emma Revel still listening in. She's head of communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs. There is this real concern. I mean, it's laughable, the idea, say, a mum wants to get a new pyjamas for her daughter who's in a hospital, baby milk, buying sanitary products. I mean, these are frankly ridiculous decisions by not just the supermarket staff, but also by the Welsh government. But I worry that we're focusing on the wrongs. We're focusing on the madness of this and not the madness of the lockdown itself.
Yes, I mean, these little peculiar examples are egregious in and of themselves. They make good stories, and it's easy to repeat these ridiculous examples. But they do obscure the sort of overall picture, which is that all of this is bonkers. And actually, the shops are not a particular vector of transmission. There's no reason that shops couldn't generally be open, provided face masks are worn and social distancing is followed. But Wales appear to have gone down this route, led by the First Minister, who seems to be sticking to his guns. So it is concerning that a constituent part of the United Kingdom has done this without sort of people are moaning and going, oh, well, this is bizarre, but nothing's actually being done. And I am, as you just said in your previous discussion, I'm quite worried about the erosion of our freedoms with no apparent pushback. I worry that 12 months, 18 months down the line, we're going to turn around and go, how did we get here? And this is how we got there.
And it's the willingness people have to give away. I absolutely supported the lockdown. Now, lots of people are lockdown skeptics from word go. I thought, look, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what the virus is like. We haven't got the capacity. But we were given very specific reasons for that lockdown. We were going to flatten the curve because we couldn't have a massive peak of lots of people getting infected at the same time and being unable to treat everyone while we got the Nightingale hospitals up and running and we got test and trace sorted. I mean, that all made sense. It was a short period. Now, I always knew it wasn't going to be 3 weeks. It was going to take longer than that. But very early on, I certainly never thought that schools should have been closed. There was no evidence for that. Very early on, we started diverging from any reputable science. We're still obsessed with computer models. This idiot, Professor Neil Ferguson, because if I did my job that badly every single day, I wouldn't expect to still be in a job. And yet people still listening to him. Radio 4 have him on every 5 minutes, seem to think he knows he's some guru. I mean, anyone who's wrong that often should not be considered to be an expert. And yet we're not looking at empirical real world evidence that tells us lockdowns don't work. And even with a vaccine, we've had vaccine experts pointing out that even with a very, very good vaccine, we are still going to see thousands of people die from this virus. We are going to have to get used to this and get on with our lives.
Yes, we seem to be stuck in the mentality that we had in late February, March, and actually it feels like a very long time. It only is a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, but we've learned a great deal about this virus since then, and we seem to be very reluctant to put what we've learned into practice and to change our policy based on the evidence.
That would be admitting that we know more. And again, it's not admitting we got it wrong in the first place. It's saying we now know more, and now now we're looking at different evidence.